I'm glad to be back at APU. My son got his bachelor's degree here, and he also got a master's degree here. And he's now in the area, and after I'm done talking with you guys after Easter, I'm going to have a chance to talk to some of the career development and vocation people at Loyola Marymount over by the airport, extending some of these ideas that I begin with you today. So this is really kind of where my heart's at. This is research, but it's research with a purpose. What you're looking at in front of you there, that beginning slide, emphasizes undergraduate students. And in many ways, again, in the whole picture of academics, undergraduates have not been considered to be major proponents of doing things in the sciences, or even beyond the sciences. It's like you sit there and you learn and you get taught, and someday maybe if you're lucky you'll go to grad school, or somehow you'll grow into some kind of profession where you'll actually be able to do something. Well, that's really wrong. We know the best way to learn anyway is by doing. And so service research combines both the excitement of science, which I really would like to convey, and the aspect of service as Christians, to be able to take all the investment that's put in us in learning by other people, by our families, the money, the time, to take that and to make it into something useful in the kingdom of God, to go save the world with what we've been learning. And of course, we're not going to save much of anything, most of us, but we want to try. We want to contribute to good things. And the idea of service research really is that you can have your cake and eat it too, so to speak. In other words, you can actually get the benefit of your education and knowing that it means and matters something while you're still an undergraduate. The particular talk I gave here was at the Geological Society of America, the biggest meeting of geologists in the world every year. I gave this just last year, and this was a 20-minute talk, so I'll go through it fairly quickly for you to show you some of the things that I'm interested in. I hope you are too. But also I've added something at the end for everybody, which is a little bit different. Topic here, pre-development surveys. Let me explain what this means. This means that students can be trained fairly easily to go out and collect information. Now, you can collect information with a piece of paper by interviewing. If it's a person of another culture, different language, you might need to know their language or have a translator. Or you might be gathering information for a survey for using scientific methods. Pre-development survey means that development is in mind, that we want to do something. When you hear about international development, you're hearing about the concept that there are people and places in the world that need some help. I don't necessarily like the word development. It always makes you feel like somebody's building big buildings or something, or bringing other parts of the world up to the same kind of lifestyle that we have, and that's not always a good thing. But in the cases where people don't have enough of the basic necessities of life, health, and just the desire to go on living and thriving as human beings, they need some help sometimes. And those of us, particularly in our culture in the West, we've been blessed with a lot of material wealth. We've been blessed with educational wealth. That's what APU represents. That's what Wheaton College represents. And to take that and realize it isn't done for us for our own benefit. Some of my students, 30 years at Wheaton, I'm sure get tired of listening to me talk about, you're not here to get a good job, folks. No, you might. I hope you do. But that's not why you're here. And we even had a chaplain at Wheaton. The last words he gave before he moved out, another chaplain came in, was, if you're here for any other reason than training to become a subversive agent of Jesus in the world, then you're in the wrong place. Go to state school. Get out of here. Because, yeah, you might get a really good job, but more important, you're going to get a good job that's focused on serving the kingdom of God, and that should fulfill your heart and be much better than just getting a bigger, better car every year, etc. So students can do things in what we call pre-development surveys, I'll show you, that make a difference. Two parts to this. There's a bunch of our geology majors on a significant field trip in the Black Hills of South Dakota on the left there. What I'm talking about is, I really believe, the best undergraduate experiential education you can get. And I'll try to defend that assertion in a minute or two. And the second thing is geoscience service for global welfare, is shown over here on the right, as that not only are you experiencing, but you are really contributing to the lives of other people. And you're establishing relationships with other people. The picture on the right there is from Eastern Europe. It's from the tiny little new nation of Kosovo. And I've been there with students over 5 years working. In this case, we're working with water resources and sanitation, which is a big theme of some of my interests in research. And bringing our trained students in to work with the local people, and realizing the local people know more than we do, and partnering with them. So we come along to kind of help them. We don't come along to tell them what to do or to show them how to do things without their major ownership of what's happening. And this is the idea of service for global welfare. Students must learn enough to be prepared. You need training. In many cases, if you're going across the seas to a different nation, or you're working in inner city or somewhere, you're working with Native Americans in the U.S. and reservations or whatever, you need a cultural orientation. You need to know that not everybody is a fluent white American. And there's a lot more of those kind of people, at Wheaton, and there probably is at Azusa, because you tap into people of, I think, more cultures here. But for a lot of us, knowing people in other cultures is something that's pretty different and pretty uncomfortable. So we have to train people to understand other people. Additionally, to help educate and train local people, you can't do that without getting to understand their needs a little bit. But going back again to the idea of collecting data, collecting information. Maybe it's experiments, looking at water quality, looking at soil compositions, looking at agricultural issues, all kinds of things that in my case are related to geoscience, earth science. Not just geology, but the broader scale, geographic things too, including things like agriculture. Learning about those things, enough of those things that you have the instruments plus your mind to be able to collect the information to help people understand, first of all, the problem, and then possibly how to solve the problem. And sometimes the problems won't be solved. And you get in there, you may be, oh, we worked so hard and we didn't get anything figured out, but you tried, and you probably did contribute to good things happening, even if you are not there to solve big problems. But you've had that taste of being involved, and that's important. So we get trained. Our education, our scientific education, as geologists, our geoscientific earth science education is important to learn how to collect the data, and then that data itself will help not just educate, but also to contribute to the welfare, the benefit of local areas. Okay, some of these. This is just a few types of research or background that I've been involved in working with students. Again, this is not my research. This is my working with undergraduate students in research as outreach. Land use planning in general. Going out and understanding where people live and what the capabilities of the land happens to be in different areas for maintaining health and welfare. And that's a big issue. Where do you construct things? Is this improper land use? Are there issues that you'll see down below that are a problem, and to be able to identify those? If students are interested in getting into a really neat area in graduate school, urban and regional planning, land use planning, is extremely important to help governments understand how to do things right, to make things sustainable, and to make things functional. I've done a lot of stuff with water and sanitation projects, as you will see. Water is considered to be, that is to say, clean, adequate supply of water is the number one biggest health problem in the world, the number one biggest physical health problem, because there's also the spiritual and mental problems that come with oppression and things too. But that which kills physically more people every single year around the world deals with bad water. It does. More than all the wars, more than most of the diseases all put together, other than those dealing with contamination of water or waterborne diseases. That's a huge issue, and it's only getting bigger. Water issues around the world are growing larger and larger and more sensitive between nations and among different people groups. And it's not just water. There's a lot of organizations right now that promise and work hard on providing water supplies for people in different parts of the world. People who don't have good enough water, let's go give it to them. How do you do that? Well, there's different ways. One of them might be catchment, picking up what's in the sky, purifying it, and providing it. Another big one is groundwater, actually drilling in the ground to find water supplies. That's geology, by the way. You don't do that unless you understand where to drill and how to drill. So water is important, but with water goes sanitation. Because even if people have an adequate amount of water, good water, and they don't have adequate sanitation from their own use, their own domestic use, and from animals or other sources of contamination for water, then they're not going to live. They're going to die. And sanitation is part of that water problem worldwide. And most recently, the things I've been working on are sort of tying the two together. And maybe a little bit more on the sanitation side as we'll get to it. Geological hazards. Think about what you hear in the news. Flooding, mass wasting. Mass wasting? What's that? Oh, that's like avalanches and mudslides. You know, in California, people know about debris flows and mudslides and avalanches. They do up in the Northwest as well. Washington State had a terrible disaster where an entire hillside came loose and wiped out a community. This is in our country, and you can imagine how much worse it is in so many other parts of the world where people don't have the technology. So studying the causes and how to deal with flooding, mass wasting, subsidence, which means the land going down, particularly as you pump water or oil out. Coastal problems, erosion, coastal flooding, coastal storms. And now, with the advent of sea level rising, in large part because of human alteration of the Earth's climate, that becomes a bigger and bigger issue all the time. Understanding coastal dynamics is very, very important. And seismic, well, that's a good California thing as well, too. Upwards of 200, I've heard this, maybe you guys know more, $200 million a year on average being spent on research to try to predict earthquakes. That's what I heard. I don't know. That sounds too big? He says it sounds about right. I'll buy it from him. Anyway, if so, that gives you an idea of how important it is to be able to predict an earthquake, to tell people it's time to get out. Look out, get away from the tall buildings, because of course buildings, as we all know, are what kill people. Earthquakes don't kill people, buildings kill people, really. And then the after effects also as well. But seismic hazards, and the idea that there's just certain things you don't build in very seismically active areas. We should know that, shouldn't we? We don't. We should know a lot of these things, but because of the lack of understanding of earth science basics amongst the world's population, including the US, we allow hazards to be much worse than they should be because of the lack of understanding, the lack of education. Mineral resources. Into the future, it's going to become more and more important where we get our energy resources, the effects of getting those resources on the environment, and including something here that I worked with students on building materials. Let's say there's a bishop in Rwanda, a Lutheran bishop, who says our people are living in shacks and they need something better. But we don't know how to do it, and we can't pay for the concrete that comes from the outside. These people don't have enough money to build the buildings they need out of concrete. What are we going to do? One say, well, what if we go have a look at your property in that area where you are locally and see if you have some earth materials that could be used for buildings? The right kind of clays, maybe some limestone, maybe gypsum, maybe different kinds of sands that can be mixed in. The point being, a little bit of knowledge can go a long way. The kind of things that you can learn in school as an undergraduate could be enough to assess the land and be able to tell people, you've got some good building materials here. You won't have to go ask people for expensive concrete from the outside. But that little bit of education that we get could be used. And finally, construction siting. Well, this happens all over the place where people build things in the wrong places because they don't realize that the soil and the ground has certain properties that can be studied. And yeah, you build it here, but you don't build it over there. Even Wheaton College has a very infamous case where they built the Billy Graham Center. Everybody knows Billy Graham. Huge, big old building in honor of Billy Graham, and they built it over top of an old Ice Age peat bog. And in order to get a foundation in there properly, they ended up having to spend an extra $3.5 million just for the foundation. And they pounded in telephone poles, 900 of them this way, to keep the building from shifting too much. Now, I've been told, before I went to Wheaton, that the geology department actually wrote a letter and said, this is not a good place to build this building. You should probably build it here, you could build it here. But no, somebody else wanted to build it where they built it. So it costs the extra money. And it has had susceptibility to cracks in the walls and flooding and other things too. So God gives us the ability to learn some things. And once we do, I think he expects us to be able to exercise those. Okay, some case studies for you, things that have been done by Wheaton College students in conjunction with myself. I have to give a plug also to a Christian organization called YWAM. Some of you have heard of Youth with a Mission. Youth with a Mission is all over the place. They're like everywhere, you know. They're like dust mites and things. They get into all the crevices of the world, and they show up in places, you know, where North Korea and Uzbekistan, and they used to be in Albania when it was a communist closed country, and amazing people, and they are everywhere, and they've been a wonderful opportunity for me to get into different parts of the world with them as hosts. Because when you're doing this international stuff in particular, or if you're doing stuff domestically in the U.S. with Native Americans or cities, you want to work with the local people. You want their confidence. You want them to partner with you. So when we went to the Republic of South Africa, right along the coast, in one of the best surfing areas in the entire world, a place called Jeffreys Bay. Anybody who's a surfer knows Jeffreys Bay. It's one of the top 5. It's got the longest single ride of any surfing break in the world, over 1.5 miles of a tube that just keeps going. That's what that guy's doing back there. Well, there's a lot of wealthy South Africans that live there. It's also one of the world's best shelling beaches, beautiful shells. But it also has a township attached to it from the old apartheid days, when all the mixed race people and the black African people were all segregated into these townships. These townships, for the most part, still exist. They haven't changed. And here's one in the Jeffreys Bay area that has about 5,000 people in it and another 3,000 to 4,000 people informally living around it, out in the middle of nowhere. When we came there with students back about 12 years ago, we found that there were 12 toilets, 12 real toilets for about 8,000 people. You think the dorm life is difficult, you know? And these toilets were set up on this little ridge outside, and hardly anybody used them because nobody maintained them. They were disgusting. They got rid of them. So where do people go to the bathroom? Outside their house, in the thickets, in the woods, anywhere they possibly could. You see where these kids are right here? Right there. You see this wet area here that's kind of gotten all soggy and stuff? There. Well, we brought students in working with YWAM and their little excuse me, their local organization, their local base. And one of the things we did was we made a map dealing with solid waste management. We wanted to help them understand the best way to deal with solid waste, which was piling up in all the streets. But we also worked with them and the local kids in trying to clean up some of their own areas. One of the things I won't say I'm proud of it, but I'm very pleased that we made it happen. We got hold of the school kids. The teachers joined us. And we gave their teams of different colored t-shirts, and we gave away prizes to clean up. You notice he's wearing gloves. To clean up, wearing gloves with plastic bags, all the trash in this one area. And these kids, over one day, about 8 hours, collected something like 4,000 bags of trash in this fairly small area. And then we had a big celebration, gave the kids away prizes and everything else. And to show the parents and everybody else that this is the kind of thing you can do for your own community and the kids can get involved. And teaching the kids a bit about their environment and how it's healthy and it's not healthy. And watch the kids playing in this water. We actually tested this water. Our geology students did tests with the water and came up with fecal coliform bacteria at 10,000 times the safe background. Fecal coliform, by the way, is from human waste. That's the kind of stuff that really makes you pretty sick. And E. coli, etc. And 10,000 times the background that's safe for us in this country. And kids are playing in this stuff. And then right over here, about 3 kilometers away, you have all the rich big houses for the people that live right there, and then the township right next door. And to try, we even got into the churches and talked to the people there to try to inspire them that these people live next to you. They're Christians too. Maybe you should think about teaming up with them to help their environment. So 4 students came with me on this one. Another case study. We were working in Haiti for a while. We got bumped out, but hope to get back again. The students working in Haiti worked on one of their biggest issues, erosion, landscape erosion, because of deforestation and cutting all the trees down to make charcoal for cooking. And when they do that, the erosion, you could look at this. This is Haiti. Haiti's one of the wettest places you can find in the Western Hemisphere. But look at this. It looks like Arizona. Little patches of green, and all the rest of this is degraded landscape where the soil's been washed away out into the ocean, killing the coral reefs and all kinds of other lovely things like right out here. And all these slopes you're looking at are eroded slopes. And so the students went in with their handheld calculators and computers and worked out the land area. They worked out the slope of the land and figured out the most susceptible areas and tried to work with some of the agriculturalists on what they could do to preserve the slopes so that they wouldn't get any more erosion. Now this is all hopeful that you're working with the people that will listen to you and want to do what you want to do too, which doesn't always happen. So working in Haiti, and up here's the latest thing that we've got. One of the people we have as an advisor for the geology department at Wheaton College is putting together a proposal for a water atlas to collect all the information possible for Haiti on their water supplies. Surface water, their groundwater, and make this available to people when they're planning. Because even though Haiti is incredibly wet, they have a terrible deficit in clean, adequate water. Most of it washes out into the ocean before it's ever get a chance to be used. A lot of the water that's in the ground people don't know about, don't know how to find it. So putting together this water atlas, and by the way, the primary operators, the primary researchers to make this thing would be undergraduate students. Okay. Tanzania, we're getting around a little bit. This was different. I had students that come to work with another YWAM base just south of Mount Kilimanjaro, which, by the way, used to have like real glaciers on top of it and stuff, and most of those have melted back and just about gone. We want to look at the health of the world's environment and things. There's several places you can look and see some major changes, and one of them that shows us that rainfall patterns have changed rather dramatically over the last couple hundred years are what's happening at the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. Yeah, it's making it hard because the people that live around there depend on the meltwater from that great big mountain to replenish their groundwater, and their groundwater supplies are diminished like other parts of the world as well. Well, here you go, Wheaton College and YWAM. These 3 guys working with Buddy Isaac there, who's sort of their local team leader guy to help them. We put in this water cistern for a community for their agriculture and for their drinking water. And we did something additional, which was kind of interesting. We actually went to visit a few places known for gemstones in East Africa and Tanzania, because this is another whole area of potential for outreach for Christians. I don't know how much you're aware of the fact that we rich folks, we like our gold and platinum and silver and diamonds and rubies and sapphires and emeralds and tanzanites and other kinds of precious stones and things that get served up to us because we can afford them. And yet these things are mined in areas where the people themselves are not particularly well cared for. As a matter of fact, the old story of colonialism, we can call it neo-colonialism now if you like, is that the rich folks come in with their resources to mine and they steal the resources from the poor folks and take it out and then throw a couple bones to the locals, maybe the politicians, to allow this to happen. We saw this actively happening in Tanzania. And my foot there is by a rock that I brought home with me, and I cut these things out because the students with me and I got together and said, what can we do for these people that are miners in these areas, that are barely making a living, that are fighting, and in these mining areas it's like the Old West. Drugs, alcohol, prostitution, violence, thousands of people living in squalor just to make a few pennies off of some of the gemstones that are sold to the West. Well, one of the things we came up with is, what if we started marketing some of their local gemstones with these people as partners? Matter of fact, having them do the manufacturing, and all we could do is try to find a market for them. We came up with a crazy idea that never went anywhere. Maybe you can fix this. I don't know. Came up with what we call the Little Africa Project. And this green, red, and black rock is called ruby and zoisite. Those are ruby crystals. Yeah, you know what rubies are. Red. Anyway, ruby crystals. The green stuff is called zoisite, and the black in there is another dark mineral. The red, green, and black, sort of the African liberation colors. So we're thinking if you could make these and polish these with the rubies in them, and then you can market it to us rich folks. Sell them with a silver clasp for, say, $100 a piece, maybe carve them. And if we could get someone like Oprah to talk about it on her show, she doesn't have that show anymore. Or someone like LeBron James or Bono to plug this stuff. We could sell 1 million of those in a week at $100 a piece. And that money could go back into education, could go back into it. So there's these kind of things like, the hula hoops are a thing called pet rocks in the old days. I don't know if you guys know that, where somebody got a beach rock, put a collar around it and sold it for $6.50, and people bought them. They bought millions of them. Well, the idea was, if the world has this crazy system, why don't we try to utilize it somehow too? Just thinking that this didn't work. This didn't go anywhere because we didn't get hold of Oprah or Bono or anybody. But just to think again, and the students thinking, how can we help these people make the use of their own resources? Whoop, back. There we go. Okay, number 4. For 5 years in a row, we worked in Eastern Europe. I say we, students, and myself. This is my colleague, Jim Clark, over here, where we're actually teaching some of the local guys how to use geophysical instruments to find groundwater. And in Kosovo, it's a fairly long story that you won't have to hear. But in Kosovo, or Kosova, as they say in the Albanian, we have villages in there that were war-torn in some terrible, terrible conflicts in the past. A conflict area of the world that's now free, is a free nation. And they don't know how to be free. And their water and their sanitation is terrible. So the students come in and we monitor the quality of their streams, and we look at that. We make these what we call GIS maps, that I'll get to in a minute. We help look at the quality of people's wells and help them maybe in cleaning up some of the water wells they already have. And we even talk to the people themselves about what their ideas, their dreams are for their villages to develop, because no government is helping them. So the little bitty college kids and professors come in underneath the radar and do what we can and can make a difference. And we have made relationships in that village. Christians making relationships with Muslims. And we tell them when they ask us, why are you here? Why are you doing all this stuff? Who's paying you? We say, nobody. And Jesus sent us. And they go, who? Isa. That's his name in the Quran, by the way. Jesus. Jesus sent us. And he tells us that you guys have these needs, and you are brothers and sisters in the Lord. And you go, oh, that's that problem again. The Christians and Muslims actually worship the same God. Well, if we worship God, we worship the same God. And we go in there and we open up the doors to talking about Jesus and Christianity to these people by loving them. And it works. It works. We got people reading the Bible. Has anybody said, I'm now a Christian? Well, you can't really do that in those communities. But we got people thinking about it. And that's the only job we can do at this point. Meanwhile, we're also trying to help them take care of their health environment so they're not so sick and they have decent water and sanitation. We know how to find these things. We know how to do these things because we have the education. And we go over there, and not only do we do it, but we teach them how to do it. This is called the training of trainers. If you look at 2 Timothy 2, Timothy. 2 Timothy 2:2 talks about the training of trainers. I pass this information down to you so that you'll pass it on to other faithful individuals who can therefore teach others. And so this idea of progression of knowledge. And we give away what we've got, including those instruments. We left them with the local guys who said, now you can go find water. Do it. This is a household survey where we're using in Kosovo. The idea is that not only do we doing all the science, and we're finding out a lot about their water sources and all that stuff, but we're also asking them things like, what are your family stories? What's your income? What are your expenses? What are your illnesses? How much can we know about you to befriend you? And in this one village of about 100 households, we actually covered every single household but 2, because one of them found out we were Christians, didn't want anything to do with us. And another one, there was really nobody around when we kept going there. But all the rest of them became our friends. Here we are having coffee up on a hillside, making relationships with people all over the world. And I'll tell you, I think we gain as much from that as they do from us. The last thing, something we initiated because there was an engineer in our area, in the Chicago area, who wanted to take the technology for water and sanitation cleanup to the people in the developing world. And it's called Pond Stabilization System. So we formed what's called the WASTE Project. And this is run by students, student researchers, testing how these things work, letting natural sunlight and oxygen and air and time kill dangerous microbes in wastewater, to do it the way God would intend it to be done. And down here it shows you some of our experiments running through time, looking at water. Finally, to the end down here of our experimentation over several months, we got to the point to where we were reducing the bacterial content in this water by about 95%, just using light and heat and natural components. No chemistry, nothing fancy. And we want to take this whole thing, these pond systems, and make them more and more available to the developing world. It's another project that's in progress. It hasn't gone far enough yet. But this is all done by undergraduates. And let me sort of end this part with this. These are testimonies from the students having worked with this project. This level of responsibility is a great educational opportunity. Nothing could be more interdisciplinary. I mean, we've got chemistry people, we've got biology people, environmental science, geology, business people involved in this, international relations. By far the best and richest experience of my undergraduate challenges. I like the fact that they put challenges. This should ultimately improve the lives of multitudes by eliminating disease. Real vigorous research with a chance to really use my education in problem solving. Ooh, I like that one. Okay. After 3 years of participation in all the aspects of investigation, grad school should be a breeze. And this is a comment from one of the people we were hoping to get these things established with. These students and faculty have become like family and will help us help ourselves. So it's nothing like hearing from the students and the people we're serving themselves to realize that we can do things. Now, I'm speaking as a geologist, as an earth scientist, but it can go a lot broader than that too. I'm going to very quickly zip through this. How many people here know what geographic information systems are? GIS. Oh, isn't that sad? APU, you're as bad as Wheaton College. This is something that every high school, maybe even earlier than that, and every college ought to have available to students. It's a computer-based system for taking information that's geographical in nature, spatial data, and using it to solve problems. And you want a job, you want a really good job, probably a job that pays well, but also one that challenges you and you can do good things. I'm putting in a plug for GIS because this is a great way to do the broader sense of science and service. It's used in education, business, marketing, economic analysis, actuarial sciences, what it has to do with insurance and so on. The field sciences, use it all the time in geology, soil science, ecology, botany, agriculture, meteorology, oceanography, archaeology, government, health and safety, international relief and development. I put those in orange because those are things that probably would relate to what goes on here at Azusa Pacific as well. But people working with things like transportation and zoning and law enforcement, geographic information systems, using a computer to take data, information that people collect, maybe you, processing it and using it to solve problems is available to all of us. And there's a lot of jobs in there. Every corporation, every industry, every government entity I know of is aware of this stuff now and is hiring people for it. This is something you can look up on your own later on. It takes the real world and breaks it down into slices of different types of spatial information. For example, imagery, elevation, transportation routes, addresses of people, boundaries, water features, survey control, your data. How do all those things relate? We want to find out who has good water, who doesn't. We can find out very quickly by using maps. Maps are the key. Utilizing geographic information in the map form on computers can be used to do all kinds of wonderful things. How do you collect the data? Well, you use GPS. Everybody knows about GPS. But these are GPS computers, too, where you can put all kinds of special data in there. And we've had students do this. I showed you some from our previous kinds of projects. But people are doing this stuff all over the world. Here's an example where they're looking at all these different local areas. And you're listening, it says income. This is broken down by income in here. And we're looking at water, air. We're looking at all kinds of things distributed by income in an area. Like, where's the need? Where are people who can't afford things? Where are people who can afford things, and so forth and so on? And you can look at distances. You can look at all kinds of different relationships of one factor versus another with GIS. There's 3 different layers looking at through here. This shows topography, and this is a whole different aspect of the topography down here and the landscape and so on. So what they're doing is they're just linking the 3 of these together and making something like this eventually, the big island of Hawaii. This is Mauna Loa volcano in here, and this shows the historical lava flows. So you can take the land surface and overlay it with color to indicate whatever you want to show. So being artistic, being creative, taking information, data, and displaying it can help you make decisions. All right, that's enough of that. Time for questions.
And I'll start off with a question. Where would you direct students to go to look for these kinds of learning opportunities if we may not have something of the like at APU?
Good. Well, first thing, bug your professors. Find out what they know. A lot of them might know things already. And a lot of them may have never used students in research before. And if you come up and buddy with them and say, you know, I'm interested in the kind of stuff you're doing. I don't care if it's interpretation of literature. But I'd like to know more and maybe work on that. You could maybe compel people to realize that undergraduate students don't have to be grad students to be able to do good stuff. In the sciences, there's lots of things. There's lots of needs. There's lots of Christian organizations that do relief work and development work that need people to go and do things. But a lot of times, and a really good question is, a lot of times you need some skill sets too. Now, that's the one thing about the sciences. I'm horribly biased about this. I apologize. But in dealing with a lot of my friends in the humanities, you know, they think that scientists are really narrow and irrelevant. And I look at them and I say, what skills do you have other than reading and opinions? You know? You read stuff and you have opinions. Come on, we're talking about being able to use statistics to look at data sets, to be able to figure out commonalities and probabilities and things like that. We're talking about being able to use different instruments that can talk about air quality, talk about water quality. We're talking about different instruments that help with human health, you know, stethoscopes or what do they call those things? Sphygmometers and other kinds of mometers and stuff like that. Yeah?
How has the sciences, geoscience, helped your relationship with Christ? How did that?
That's a great question. He asked, how does the geosciences, as a geologist, how does that deal with my relationship with Jesus? Well, my wife and I were up in the hills today, up in the San Gabriels. And every time I get up there and I look at those views, and I look at those rocks, and I look at the bald eagle and the baby bald eagle in the nest that was up there, and I look at the water in the reservoirs, and I look at the flowers, and I just sit there and think, God is incredible. God is amazingly creative. And God is good in bringing that water. Just think about if those reservoirs were continually dry and they didn't bring any water this year. So there's so many aspects of God's creation that draws us towards Him. You know, I mean, David said that as he's contemplating the skies, seeing how small people are compared to the wonders of the stars and so on. But we have to recognize that all these things that we consider to be beautiful in nature come from God's creativity. And to study that nature is a real privilege. It really is. Even rocks, honestly. I have to confess, we were looking at cool rocks today. Yes, rocks can be cool. You saw some green and red and black ones there, but for various reasons. And there are clues that are built into the rocks about the making of the continents and the history of the earth and all kinds of neat things. So to be a geologist, to study the things of God that God created and called very good is very good. But beyond that, to also realize that some of the problems of the earth that are related to these issues, and to be able to help people deal with those problems, to make things better perhaps, to understand how to live with God's creation better. That's a big part of being a geologist. It really is. And one of the things I teach in my intro geology class is that God has developed the world, the universe, and particularly the way we think of the earth, involving systems. Systems. Hydrologic systems, the water cycle. We talk about the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, plate tectonics itself, which recycles rocks. All these systems of dynamic features that we see in streams and coastlines and volcanoes and everything else, and atmospherics, they're very much like systems in the human body, and they're interconnected. And when we see those systems and we don't understand them and they break down because we do things unwisely, people get sick and die. But the environment can do the same thing if we are unwise. So as a Christian, to realize that God said it's very good, part of God's creation's intention, I think, before God is to keep it sustainable, to help it function. And if you don't know how it functions, you can't do that. So if you don't know how the earth works, you can't really live on it. Like the people that will build their house, the old song, build your house on the sand instead of the rock, That happens all the time. Build the Billy Graham Center on a peat bog. Wasn't very wise, but they didn't ask the geologists, So I think that scientists, no matter what, if they're studying stars, if they're studying mitochondria in a cell, if they're studying, quantum mechanics, it's amazing some of the statements that have come out of scientists of how they see the revelation of God in their sciences. It doesn't pull you away. Some people say science takes you away from God. No, it doesn't. That's not a human pursuit. We only get it from God, get the curiosity, and get the good stuff from Him as well. Long answer, but thank you. I think it's always difficult in an academic world, not as bad with the sciences, honestly, as it is with the humanities or social sciences. Being a rabid Christian in the social sciences or humanities can be a really, really tough job. I've known so many scientists that consider themselves agnostics or atheists and stuff that really respect me and what I say if I do it right. And they know I'm a believer and I talk about God this way. And I'm hoping that it's attractive. I hope that it sparks them. They were made by the same Creator. And I'm always hoping that maybe if I say things right without stepping on people, then that can do the same sort of a deal. But it can be very hard. And there is bias, obviously. But there's bias, as much bias or more bias in the church than there is on the outside. I've had harder trouble with other believers as a geologist than I have with atheists. That's pretty sad. It really is. One of the big problems in development is going in as a flash and doing something and then leaving it, and you come back a year later and it's not sustainable. Number one, you've got to have an established base and a host who's going to help make something sustainable. You have to be working with people that can continue whatever improvements are there. So we never go in alone and do something without working with a local organization, community, church, experts. Matter of fact, we never go in unless we're invited to come in, because those are the people that are going to be there long term. Now, there may be missionaries that are going to be there long term, and they can help do that. But working with students, we've gone everywhere from 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. And some of the stuff we do with this program we call the Hunger Program at Wheaton goes for actually 6 months on site. And that's still not much. That's not like the classical missionaries. But a lot of time, a lot of times we're trying to teach people things, and if we can train them, they've learned that and they can do it themselves. We can't guarantee that they'll do it, but you really hope that you'll be working with people that are zealous. The first ones that ask you in are usually the ones that are willing to put in the time themselves anyway. So these could be very short-term things where you just kind of come in and do something and leave, or they can be longer-term things. Longer the better, but often we're limited by the amount of money and resources we have to make them longer-term. So most of what we do with undergraduates really is on the shorter-term side. What he said is, what's the long-term success, if you wish, spiritually and physically in these projects?
Or just some of the stories.
And some of the stories. Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of bad stories of things not being sustainable. A lot of it's because, for example, in South Africa, the guy who asked us in left. And very often, ministries and projects depend on 1 or 2 people. And if they don't train enough other people, they don't have enough other apprentices, for example, then the project falls apart. And I've seen that happen. The people we work with in Kosovo, in Eastern Europe, are there all the time. And they've seen a lot more people coming to them. And as a matter of fact, I'd say 85 households now have much cleaner, better water supplies in the long run because of what was done. So there's good stories and there's sad stories. People who are looking for numbers in evangelism. This is one of the big bugs for development people is, well, how many did you convert? Well, people say, I have no idea. Because we were there to do what God gave us to do. We weren't there to get them to sign on the dotted line. This wasn't a Billy Graham crusade we were on, But I can tell you this, when we go back, they love us. And we love them, and they know where we're coming from. And God can work out the rest of it. So I'd say there's mixed stories. Some of them are very good. The ones that are the least good, the ones that we could look at as more failures, would be the places that the people themselves that are there are not sustainable in what they're doing. And we've seen both. We've seen both. Well, internships, you could work with companies or organizations too, but a lot of times you've got to go seek those yourself. If you have a good office on campus, perhaps, that maybe they can help you, but a lot of times these will be through friends, through family. They find out that you're interested, and they get you going. Christian organization, perhaps, or others. You've got to be aggressive. Do not wait for somebody to come hand you something and say, hey, we really need you to go. Be aggressive. Say, I want to do something. And the people that usually are the most successful are the ones that take it and pray about it and push it forward. And they are available. They're out there. They are out there. You desire to serve the kingdom, the king will use you.